taking us back to the story of the 14-year malnourished teenager. And while everyone is trying to solve the problem of this teenager, we seem not to understand what they want. They're in a dark room, they need food. We seem to figure out that they need milk. But what kind of milk do they need? So ladies and gentlemen, this panel is going to explore how we are going to get out this teenager out of the house, get some light, help him get some light, and become healthy enough to thrive in the society. And so I will go ahead and just start by reflecting upon Katiba at 14. And our constitution is the cornerstone of all the legislations in this country, including the Public Finance Management Act and many other policies that are embedded through the Constitution. And I want to throw this to Abraham. The Public Finance Management has included various strategies to ensure that there is inclusion of marginalized, groups in terms of budget participation. So maybe if you look back, if you reflect, how far are we? What has been done? What are the challenges? What do we term as wins? And what can be done better? Especially when we talk about participation in the budget process.
Thank you very much, Marian, and good afternoon to everyone in the room. Good afternoon. Thank you. So my name is Abraham, as you heard, I work with Budget Hub.
And yes, we deal with matters budget. And from the previous panel, we really had a lot about the history of the Katiba and just the opportunities that came about with this constitution. And as Marion, you say, the Public Finance Management Act of 2012 is one critical pillar that was to really change how we raise, spend, and even account for public resources. And public participation was one of the anchors in every single decision around the budget process. So chapter 12 of this very Katiba talks a lot about how public resources will be managed. And with the Public Finance Management Act, we've seen lots of opportunities for citizens to engage throughout the budget cycle. And just to be clear, we know that the budget cycle is not just 1 year. From beginning to end, it's about 2.5 years. So it's actually 2.5 years from the time we start formulating our budget up until the point the Auditor General completes the auditing of the budget. And therefore, along this 2.5 years, there are several opportunities that the Public Finance Management Act has provided for citizens to engage within the public finance space or the budget cycle as we know it. So and right now, I think yesterday we saw a public notice from the National Treasury saying that we are starting the budget formulation cycle for 2025-2026. And no, that's for the next financial year. So it's starting right now. So if you're to influence as a citizen, then this is the time for you to start engaging with this budget process. And not just at the formulation, because we know we have the 4 stages. So there's an opportunity for us as citizens to engage at the formulation stage. And that will be, we see a lot of opportunities there at the formulation. But many cases, we find that citizens just want their issues or their priorities to be within the budget, but they don't, once it's there, it's been approved, then we sit back and wait for the magic to work in terms of implementation. But we realize that implementation is where there's a lot that happens, because at formulation, we will have, when we're discussing issues at the sector working groups, we will have the public engaged. When we come to the budget policy statement, this is a national level, but also at the county, there's a parallel process that goes on for the county fiscal strategy paper. People are involved. When we come to the actual budget being approved, we are involved, and we've seen public being invited to participate. But when it comes to implementation, that's where a lot happens, because there's supplementary budgets, but there's no law that compels the government to get citizens engaged within supplementary budgets. And that's where a lot really gets shifted. So it's more or less like shifting priorities from the what citizens want. But one thing I must also emphasize is that this public participation has been really like on steroids over the past few years. But the question we ask ourselves is, what amounts to public participation? And if the ruling by the Court of Appeal on the Finance Act 2023 is anything to go by, I think we have a lot to learn from that, where a lot of the basis on which the act was thrown out was on public participation, where the public is involved, but the decision that is being taken by Parliament has nothing to do with what the public wanted. And therefore, we liked that the recommendation that was given was that when public, or say Parliament has done any public participation, say for example like finance bill, which I think everyone can relate, then they have to give justifications as to why they picked certain issues or why they did not. But that was not the case, and therefore we see that whereas there's been a lot more of citizens being engaged, we are still seeing that the decisions being taken by both government, Parliament are not necessarily reflective of the desires of the people.
Okay, thank you so much, Abraham. In talking about citizen participation, we cannot talk about that without talking about the inclusion of young people. And so, Telvin, Badili Africa engages young people a lot, particularly on civic engagement. We have, however, seen that the young people, through the recent movement, Gen Z movement, they are not content with their feedback to the government, and they're not buying any explanations. And so at Badili Africa, then, how do we better engage young people beyond the traditional ways of carrying out civic engagement?
Thank you very much. My name is Steven Kote. I serve at Badili Africa, and the topic of inclusion is very important, and it's not even about just young people, and also even gender inclusion. And for us, even at Badili Africa, we are trying to even stem it very at the bottom level, even at the institution of higher learning. And the reason why you're seeing even people are not even, they're not contented of what happened, as he has said, what the issues that we were able to raise are not the issues that were able to be presented in front, and people are even losing trust even with public participation. But that does not mean it should end. It actually means, how do we now engage especially the young people with the language that they are able to understand, because we are used to the traditional ways where people even are able to meet at I remember even back at home, we used to meet at chief's houses, chief's camp. But then young people, we are a generation of, we are a digital generation. And I think one of the things that we even having conversation is, how do we even integrate the digital media when it comes to public participation? How do we meet the young people at their forte, at their comfort? Because asking them to come at somewhere like KICC, you'll not have a good representation of young people coming in. So how do we even strategize when it comes to digital media? Social media in Kenya is one of the aspects that is being used largely with young people, be it Instagram, be it Twitter. And we have, I think one thing I'm going to mention is these influencers. Influencers are used to influence a lot of things that we do. The products that you wear, the makeup that you wear, the watch that you're going to wear is because someone told you is something that is important. So one of the things that we're even trying to see, even when it comes to strategizing, how do we now train these young people when it comes to even the process of budgeting, as he has mentioned, that they can be able to disseminate this information in a language that the young person in campus can be able to understand, so that when it comes to even holding the leaders accountable, when it comes to even the budget process and monitoring, they have a basis as to what it is that they are holding people accountable. And some of the things that we are doing is even in the language that the public participation is done. And one of the things that we are even seeing in some of the schools, some of the institutions of higher learning that we are working in, is even as simple as student governance. we see a lot of young people not being involved in the process of budgeting. So you don't know, you're not analyzing to see what is the need of the young person, what is that specific need, because the young person, the need of a young person is different from the need of a man or of someone who is older. So what is it that is that need? You analyze so that when you're coming up with the budget, you are able to know, you're able to target even the allocation so that it targets the specific need of young people. And some of the things that we're even doing in integrating tech when doing these, we are coming up with ways in how we can be able to integrate tech. And one of the things that is even bearing fruit in the institution of higher learning, we're coming up with things that are called virtual hubs. These virtual hubs are supposed to be a place, a digital space where young people, the students can be able to just interact with the leaders that they have elected in the student government as early as when they are trying to strategize the budget, so that when they come up with the budget, it targets the specific need of the student, that they, if be it the hostel, is it more hostel that we need, is it security that we need, so that when it comes to even implementation, how it is implemented at the heart of the student, at the heart of the young people. And I think that is one of the most important things, being able to just strategize in a language that the young people knows. Meet them at their arena is the social media. And I like what we did. Even we are seeing the Gen Z movement. Yeah. A lot of movement are done, and people are saying we should organize, but we organized. We organized in the social spaces, and we saw the change that we can be able to cause with just the organizing that we did with our language, with the tool that we most understand. And it becomes like most of the things that are done even in the budgeting is the document that they are using. It's so, I want to say CSO jargons, but then what is the language that the young people can understand? Be it audio, be it animation, something that is visual attractive also for them to be able to understand. And even that is even something that as basic as the Constitution, which is what all of this is anchored towards, so that they can be able also to even have a very good idea of what the Constitution is saying and how they can be able to be actively participating in these budget processes and evaluation.
Thank you so much. That was very, very comprehensive. Sonia, I see you smiling. I'm coming to you with the question of public debt. During the recent public rage and Mandamano, public debt was one of the most common conversations around Twitter, and it was so bad that Kenyans even tagged IMF and World Bank and told them, stop funding our country because of corruption. And as Okoa Uchumi, you have been heavily working on issues of public debt. We are currently at 10.6 trillion as a country, and a majority of our budget is going to pay debt. What is the impact of this, particularly on service delivery, and how do we balance between looking for debt to fund development and without overburdening taxpayers?
Okay, I think I'll start with mentioning something that I got from the plea. I have always asked myself, where do those rungus come from? But the Mheshimiwa somehow said there's always a car somewhere that is distributing. So that was my highlight for that. But back to your question, when you talk about the impact, let's recall the day the president made, was it the rejection of the finance bill? And then there's a news anchor who asked a question on how are we going to get development? What was the reaction of all the leaders behind him? They laughed, right? And they asked us, "Simesema hamtaki development." So in a nutshell, that's the impact. Because if all our money is being channeled on paying for things that we never received, it means what we really need, we will not be able to get. And it's so sad that as citizens, we have been brought to that level where you have to weigh. Today, I was very sad in the morning to see my people from where I come from. Nikama, the conversation has changed. When did we become who we are today? And what has changed? Just a few weeks ago, we were talking about public debt. People were speaking about the conversation, even at county levels, about pending bills and how it has affected the life of the common mwananchi who relies on this money to be able to get their daily subsistence or whatever. When we talk about public debt, the ripple effect, to me, is the road that my son needs to use. The bus has to take longer, so he has to wake earlier. Let's not look at it from up here. Bring me into the conversation. Bring my child, bring my grandmother, who does not understand the reason why the Kariva along her place has constantly been going beyond. When I was a child, it's a place called Auji. It was well maintained because that place has swampy, when it rains it's too watery, so it was created sort of a drainage. That thing is in non-existence because who is there to take care of it? Back then I could see, my dad is a businessman. Those who know Kisumu, Kibuye Market. I would see people come and collect things in terms of garbage and they take it to a certain place where it's designated. But that no longer happens now because there is no money to pay the casual laborers. But in ideal, these people are being paid. Let me connect one thing I'm proud of when you mentioned when citizens mentioned sending emails to IMF. I am glad that we have gotten to a place where citizens believe we have the power, despite the IMF coming back and saying, we are not in contract with you citizens, we are in contract with your government. So if we can still cause change, one of us asked the question in the morning, if the institutions that are mandated to keep guard are unable to keep guard, which some say is because of lack of information. But I believe when the call for release of the public debt register came out, did we finally see so much information about public debt that we could not receive before? So there is power in our voices, and we need to make sure that we bring it out fully. When the independent institutions are failing us, and I think one of the reasons why the public debt conversation still is an issue is because of the corruption that is embedded in it. If we were taking loans, like my mom would take loans to take me to school, it would not have been because at the end of the day, I have benefited from it. But now we are taking loans and we can't see it. When the list on what the money has been, how much has been loaned, and what it was supposed to do came out, we can't really see anything. Was it Mufasa who did a skit talking about dams and something today? That's the reality of our people. So let's look at impact. To me, that person who was supposed to be paid his bills at County X cannot be paid. And recently I heard of a case of someone who was contracted by Kiambu government to do something, but he died after doing the work, but has never been paid. But to do that work, he had asked for a loan to do that. Remember, he's dead. Part of collateral was his home that his wife has been left for, that is now being grabbed by the bank. So we look at the impact at the citizen. And at the Institute, we also try to bring this conversation to the citizens. And that's why my focus on the response is on the people. When we start talking about how it affects me, then I get involved into the conversation because my son might not be able to get that structured or well-built class because the government says there is no money to construct the class he needs to school. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Sonia, for the very great insights. And I just want to connect all the conversations we've had to now Hiton's question. Oftentimes when we talk about human rights, we think it's all about arbitrary arrests, people being killed. But then do we ever stop and look at human rights violation from a public finance angle? And to Hiton, because of poor finance, public finance management in Kenya, what are we seeing as a result, particularly for the marginalized communities of this country?
Very quick. Let's do this. 1, 2, 1, 2. Comrades, power.
Power.
Not power here. Comrades, power.
Power.
Comrades, power. Yeah.
Power.
Katiba, power.
Power.
Okay, so great question. And first of all, just to say that I'm really happy to be here. I apologize. I was supposed to be an earlier platform, but I was with 50 youth leaders from across different universities, 12 universities, who are also doing a reflection at this time, which is so important for many of us to do. I think in the 14 years of the Constitution, this is the year where I have been most worried about the state of constitutionalism, perhaps with the exception of maybe 2017, which was the prolonged election period. But I don't think Kenya has lurched between constitutionalism, authoritarianism, and anarchy so acutely as it has in the last 4 or 5 months. Your question was really around the, I guess, what we would call the Bill of Rights. And in many ways, yes, Amnesty has, and other organizations have focused primarily on the violations of civil and political rights, particularly this period, the right to assemble, freedom of speech, the right to assembly, and the right to association. But I think we have to also keep an eye on the creeping violations that are happening when you start to see the eroding of essential services that are not just a privilege, but are a right guaranteed within the Bill of Rights. In 1996-97, a few of us started the conversation around the campaign, Basic Needs Are Basic Rights. And we were met with anything from dismissal to derision. A former presidential advisor, who I think is still advising the presidency even after the change in the national administration, Mutahi Gunji, responded to that campaign back in 1997 and said, what next from this group of middle-class Nairobi-based NGOs? The right to good sex, the right of parents to, I got some people's attention that moment. I could see there was like, okay, this is getting interesting. But he actually said that, you know, the idea of the right to food, the right to water, the right to health, that these were abstract, nonsensical rights that no self-respecting constitution should have. And this is only as far back as 1997. And again, he said, the right to good sex, the right to parents, right of parents to children who pass their exams. The second one seemed to me like a logical one for me, but we weren't able to push it very hard. Now you fast forward to 2010, when we have this enshrined, albeit within these famous words of progressively attained over a period. And I think for many of us, we have got to a point where we realize that unless we begin to define what does progressively attained mean, then we are going to perhaps be progressively attaining this into 6 or 7 generations and not see a society in which people can walk into medical clinics and to hospitals and get treated without having to dip into their pockets or their families go into financial catastrophes. So I think that is probably my reflection in this moment, that we do need to start seeing the kind of energy that we saw around debt, around the projects, the unfinished projects. We need to start seeing pressure points begin to develop around those points of service delivery that are coming at those points, not just from a moral argument, even a financial argument, but from a rights-based compliance argument. So when are we going to start seeing people, state officers who are essentially presiding over clinics, schools, and various other water points being sued for the failure to provide good quality services? I think the second thing that I'd wanted to say in the earlier panel, which I hope you'll allow me to just speak to now, is we seem to have got our priorities lopsided. When the 8 nominees, the reappointed 8 CS nominees came back and gave their voluntary submissions on their net value, conservatively, what we saw was that they had managed to expand their net value by anything between 15% and 80% as of October 2022. But yet those people, those state officers, had also presided over ministries whose budgets had decreased by anything between 4% and 60%. And what is really interesting is that the 2 CS nominees who were essentially who had come from the Ministries of the Interior and the Ministry of Defense, 2 ministries that are not known for their transparency, that they were the 2 CS nominees that had done best in terms of the 18 months in their personal capacity, but not necessarily in their ministerial portfolios. So I think we have to ask the question, why is it in a country where you have over 37%, 39% of the population under the poverty line, that the people who are being identified to run those ministries are doing better personally than the ministries are doing themselves? And I think for those of you following the the elections in the United States of America, if the United States can have a vice president in the Democratic Party who comes to lead in that country and self-declare that he has no stocks, he has no bonds, and he has no real estate, and it is a truth, then why are we allowing people to be appointed to positions who are coming essentially to expand their personal wealth at the expense of public services? So I think that's one of the areas that I would like to see not Gen Z focus on, but the multi-generational accountability movement that I like to call the Occupy movement. I would like to see them occupy that discourse very directly. And then I could go on, but I think this would be the first response.
Okay, thank you so much for that very comprehensive response. So I'll just pick it up from there and shoot the next question to Wambua. As Hilton is talking about accountability in multi-generational, in different generations, we have to realize that even when Gen Z was speaking up, they were labeled names, and some of the things that I was told was if you don't organize yourselves, then no one is going to listen to you. But then if you look at our political system, it's very skewed towards organizing for you to be heard. Then my question is, must we be organized, or should we then rethink a way of how we can engage young people in political conversations?
Yeah, thank you for the question. My name is John Wambua with the United Disabled Persons of Kenya. I will respond to that, but allow me first just to, because I work with the disability persons organizations, I think I want to, just in a little bit, to reflect from a disability lens on what it means on the Katiba at 10. And I just want to do that on 2 key points. One is on the participation, and another one is on the representation. On participation of persons with disability in governance and development processes in our country, as we have seen some surge in the numbers of persons with disability participating in governance processes, for example, like in budgeting processes in the counties. And to know participation definitely is a creature of the Constitution, because the Constitution also gave birth to other laws that center participation, like County Government Act, Urban Areas and Cities Act, PFMA Act of 2015. As persons with disability, we have taken opportunity of the participation to be part of the decision-making processes. So when I scan the disability landscape in national and also in the counties, we have seen some surge of numbers of persons with disability participating specifically on budget processes, especially on the formulation stage and also in the implementation stage. The numbers are very high when you compare to some baseline. The numbers right now are very high, which is thanks to the Constitution on centering the participation bit of it. The question we are trying to ask ourselves mostly is we are seeing the numbers being high, but what about the effectiveness of that participation? That's we are trying to grapple with that. You participate in large numbers, but are you effecting that kind of a change? And part of addressing that is that we capacity build persons with disability to take opportunity effectively of these processes. As we speak now, I think Budget Hub, actually you are training one of our guys in Manzoni right now on budget processes. So as a hit Constitution, as far as we are concerned on participation, it has been very good to us. It's just to us now to take the opportunity. On representation, here is where I think we have a huge miss as far as disability. I'm doing this. I'm reflecting on disability lens. As far as disability lens is concerned, I think on the representation, we have a miss there. Constitution Article 100, Article 98, Article I think also 97, we're talking about representation of persons with disability in key decision-making places. We're talking about county assembly, we're talking about the Senate, we're talking about also in other government bodies. And this representation, for example, representation in county assemblies, the vision is to each county assembly to have at least a representation of person with a disability. This is law, this is what legal and policy framework says, and this is what the Constitution is envisioning. But now, 14 years old, what we are seeing specifically on a representation is a graph that is showing trend that is not very encouraging. In 2013, in all 47 counties, only 4 lacked representation of persons with disabilities in 2013. In 2017, we had 17 counties without representation of persons with disabilities. I think you can see the trend. In 2022, we had 22 counties without a representation of persons with disabilities. So as a reflection and to see what Constitution, looking at that trend, and evaluating Constitution as for now, you can see why I say it's some sort of a huge miss for us. So I'm also concerned on if this trend is to continue, what am I looking at in 2032? Are we talking about the graph just going down to 0 or even past that? These are some of the things that are concerning. The last point I want to make is on representation regarding appointment and also in terms of employment, because person with disability employment is a huge thing, definitely inclusive employment, because we might be talking about economic growth, but this is not inclusive economic growth. So for inclusive economic growth, then it also need to be equal to persons with a disability. In terms of employment, Constitution Article 54C specifically states that in employment and in appointive positions, you need to reserve 5% to persons with disabilities. It's very expressive. It is saying they are going to progressively meet the 5% quota job reservation for persons with disability. 14 years later, what I'm looking at, the data is not very encouraging. The Public Service released a report last year, but one, and they said that the representation right now stands at 1.4%. 14 years later, we have 1.4% representation. I think it's a simple math. So when will we hit half of the 2.8%? I'm thinking in 28 years, right? So I think the idea is that our constitutional threshold will be met after 56 years. 1.4 is a simple math. So after 56 years is when we are likely to see us meeting the 5.4 representation. So these are some of the misses that I think I had to talk about, because I had to reflect on it from disability lens. Just very quickly to talk about the finance bill and what we saw around Gen Z. I will still talk about it from bias a little bit. What I want to say is that the Gen Z are also persons with, disability cuts across. So we have Gen Z who are persons with disabilities, intersectionality. You are Gen Z, but you are Gen Z who has a disability. So also persons with the disability, they participated in the process of making their voices heard during these demonstrations. They wrote petitions. Actually, they also went to the streets. They are part of the Gen Z movement. And the best thing we are seeing coming out of it is that the influence of Gen Z is not only on the mainstream, but also to organizational persons with disabilities. Out of it, we are seeing in organizational persons with disability, Gen Z is also taking leadership roles and also, revitalizing and bringing a lot of synergies to this organization to speak to youth kind of focused issues, whether it's to do with leadership or budgets. And to your point, I don't think that I think a lot of power that was coming out of Gen Z is because it was some sort of organic movement, right? it drew power from it being organic movement. That's what I want to say. So my point would be, for it to be effective, it does not really have to be organized in the way that would think you want to register things, you want them to be guided by rules and all that. I think if you are to structure it in that way, then it will fall under the categories of other organizations and it might lose some of its import. Because I truly believe it was drawing the power from it being organic and some sort of sorry. I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I'll end it at that and have maybe a round of questions, just one, because time is not on our end, on our side. Sorry. And I'm seeing 1, 2. If the mic can rove around so that it's real quick, I'll appreciate that. Yeah. One question. Okay, just one question.
Okay.
And Kenley, maybe you can say who you are directing it to so that we save on time.
Thank you very much. My name is Cliff Matundura Nyandusi, a student at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. So I have 2 or 3 questions to the panel. Whoever chooses to answer will answer. So my first question is public participation. What are the set standards that are there in the Constitution? And by set standards, I mean by the direct participation that the procedures have been laid by the Constitution. And the other informal or rather indirect public participation, the one that we have been doing on our Twitter spaces, on our social media, because you can't tell us that we are only going to listen to you when it is formal. Our voice in our Twitter spaces, in our social media platforms. The next question is, what is our public debt? I've been trying to research our public debt. I'm still not sure. The other day, Jimmy Wanjigi told us that hatuna deni. Kindly, as TISA, as human rights organization, kindly can we clarify? Because I am sure if we are sure about the public debt, public participation will be a lot easier. Yes, those are my 2 questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So I think anyone, Abraham?
So I can take the question on what are the set standards. And so as I mentioned when I was opening, I talked about certain opportunities that are available along the budget cycle that requires the executive, but also the parliament to open up the decisions that they take to the public. And if we see it, the formal spaces that exist, so for example, when the cabinet secretary for treasury is about to go and say, for example, right now you'll see there's a notice that will come out for the public to give input in terms of what are some of the priority areas or what key issues does the government need to focus on for the coming financial year, that's 2025, 2026. And that's one of the opportunities. But even as we go onto the budget cycle, when we come now into the sector hearings, which normally happen around December, then it's also an opportunity. The public are invited. Normally at KICC, we usually question the mode in which it's conducted because it's held centrally at KICC. So that's another opportunity for citizens to come and perhaps just engage with the sector-specific deliberations. So it happens over a week, a whole week, and different, say for example, Ministry of Health will come and say, in the health sector, these are the issues that we are going to be looking at. These are the perhaps what the resource requirements we need. And from that, and that's an opportunity for the citizens to engage as well. Then we move on. For every single decision, there is an opportunity. But for us as an organization, we have seen the flow in the formal spaces, and therefore we have gone ahead to create certain informal spaces where we call pre-budget deliberation forums. So before there is a certain decision that is taken, we convene the public on Zoom. It's an open platform for people to engage and share their views on certain matters that perhaps when you go to KICC, you may not be given the opportunity to speak. But we come together, and after each of those forums, whether we've been requested for input from either the executive or parliament, we always make sure that we have a memorandum that we do send to whichever body is conducting that public participation. But also one thing that I may have missed to mention was the issue of access to information, which was discussed in the previous panel. And public or citizen engagement goes hand in hand with having access to this budget documents. So if they are not available at the point at which we are supposed to be engaging, then there's a problem, because even as we go into these formal spaces, which we have seen a lot, particularly at the county level, there's a lot of public participation. It's happening, but you go there are no budget documents, and you're expected to engage. So that is also one of the other challenges that we have seen within the public deliberation side of it. So there's still a long way to go around public participation, but indeed we are seeing certain steps, and if the court is also coming to give direction, then we are seeing that we are indeed going towards the right direction. Thank you.